Every neighborhood has a heartbeat, a place that represents the cultural epicenter of the area at its core. In Boston's historic North End, that place is Boston Barber and Tattoo Company. Boston Barber and Tattoo Company has become home to A-list Boston celebrities like Gordon Hayward, Milan Lucic, Brad Marchand, and Aaron Baines. Boston Barber and Tattoo is more than just Boston's most well-known corner barbershop. It's also a tourist attraction for the hundreds and thousands of people that visit the North End throughout the year. Boston Barber and Tattoo, a North End landmark that represents the cultural epicenter of the area at its core, located at 113 Salem Street.
Welcome to another edition of the Good and Plenty NBA version of the podcast every Tuesday. And today I'm joined by my producer slash co-host, Evan Valenti, as the NBA approaches. We're in the midst of preseason. We're about a week away from the regular season starting up. And again, please subscribe. iTunes, Stitcher, CLNS Media. You can find me at Goodman Hoops on Twitter. I'm also on Stadium at watchstadium.com. And again, please give us your feedback, reviews, recommendations, whatnot. Today's show brought to you by Charlotte's Web. Go to cwhemp.com and enter the code GOOD at checkout to get 10% off your order. Don't forget to enter the code GOOD at checkout to get 10% off. Today's show also brought to you by Audible. Go to audible.com/plenty or text plenty to 500500 for a 30-day free trial with Audible, which comes with an audiobook and 2 audiobook originals. We're recording this podcast Monday night. I'm actually in Chicago, and we've actually got some real news that happened in the NBA earlier today. And Phoenix Suns general manager Ryan McDonough was fired earlier today by Suns owner Robert Sarver. And if this had happened, I don't know, before the draft, even right after the draft, some point in the summer, it might have not have been so surprising. But this coming down a week before the start of the regular season, Evan, just doesn't bode well for a Phoenix Suns team that really hasn't done anything in years and was finally starting. You're starting to feel good about the young pieces coming together. I know Devin Booker's hurt, but you got Booker, you got Ayton. You added Trevor Ariza, a good veteran that I think could have helped these young kids. Yeah, you didn't have a point guard, obviously. You need a point guard to win in the NBA. But just a baffling decision when it happened and showing more dysfunctional, with this organization. I mean, a year ago, they fired Earl Watson early on in the regular season. And now this, again, it doesn't bode well for the stability of this franchise.
Yeah, Phoenix is interesting, man. There's some seriously interesting young talent there, but there's been a lack of direction from the front office for a couple of years now. Like how they've gotten to the point without a true point guard, I just don't understand, considering not too long ago they had 3 point guards on their roster: Isaiah Thomas, Eric Bledsoe, and Goran Dragic. Now they just have none of them. They have a bunch of young bigs. They struck out on the Dragan Bender and Marquise Chris draft, and they've since traded Chris to go get Ryan Anderson. Like, some moves haven't made sense, and I fully understand why some Suns fans were puzzled in the offseason. Firing your GM a week before the season starts is never a good thing. I just don't understand. You have him plan the entire offseason. You get into the draft with him. And then all of a sudden, now the offseason's over, the preseason has started. Now he's done. Like, what did he do from August or July or June on to now to get fired? Like, this is something that I just don't get it. Like, if you're going to fire your GM, like you've had, like Philly, for example. Philly fires their GM. They fire Colangelo, right? Because this giant scandal pops up, and they just want to rid themselves of it. So basically, they're like, okay, Brian Colangelo, you got to go, okay? In this case, there was nothing public that came out about Ryan McDonough doing anything crazy with Phoenix. Has it been a little rocky there? Absolutely. They've had some bright spots. You mentioned Devin Booker. DeAndre Ayton in a couple of preseason games that I've seen, looks like a man-child out there. They have good young talent. I kind of like Josh Jackson, but yet to do it now before the season starts, like literally before the season, it just doesn't make any sense. Like, who else does this? Unless there's something behind closed doors, Jeff, that we don't know.
I haven't heard
comes
anything.
out later.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you if you heard anything.
Zero. And I've known Ryan McDonough probably as long as anybody. I think I met him the first time when he was like a lowest level guy under Danny Ainge at a prep school event. Had to be going back 15 or so years ago. And you know, listen, the one thing is a lot of people turn this GM job down for him to get it. You know, I remember I think David Griffin didn't want it, and people are talking about maybe Griff would take it now. I can't imagine he would touch this because he dealt with.
Well, he said it on your podcast. It has to be like a really serious job because doesn't his wife have some job in Napa Valley that they really enjoy? Like,
it's not even that.
I don't think he's going to give it.
But it's not even
right?
that, Evan. It's that no GM wants to work for a meddlesome owner. And he already did that once, Griff did, with Dan Gilbert. He's not going to do it again with Sarver, who's as meddlesome as any owner pretty much in the NBA. And that's the problem now. So you're not going to get a big-time GM. Now you've got players, you know, agents, everybody wondering what's going on with this franchise. And, you know, you want to try to get some stability with it. And you know, it's just it's interesting because they've got a chance now. You know, you've got an elite level, to me, talent-wise, big man in Ayton. I mean, he's gonna be really, really good. And Devin Booker, you paid a lot of money to, but he'll be one of the best wings, you know, in the NBA in time. He's so young. And you got another wing in Josh Jackson who hasn't come along as quickly as people would like, but he is tough. He's not a great offensive player in terms of a scorer, but he's a great like Jaylen Brown type. That's what Josh Jackson is. In my opinion, he's a great like fifth guy to have out there. So do you need to add a couple guys? Sure. Absolutely. They're not going to be great this year. So again, they're going to have probably a pretty high draft pick next season and have a chance to maybe add another piece, you know, another big, you know, TJ Warren's fine coming off the bench. I'm not sure he's fine, you know, as one of your top guys. I'd rather have somebody a little bit better. But ultimately, this goes back to now you've got a rookie coach who not a lot of people know a ton about. And now, again, who's running things? Who's running things there? And when people think the owner is running things, guys don't want to play in those places generally.
Well, look at the teams that are successful around the NBA, and then look at who their owner is, and look at how much involvement there is. Now, obviously, there are some caveats. Like Dan Gilbert was very involved with Cleveland, but they also got LeBron, which made them very successful, right? You know, Cubes is I would say pretty involved in Dallas, but their structure is pretty good. They've had Dirk for a long time. They've drafted okay. They've done pretty well recently. They landed a Doncic, which is incredible. They drafted Dennis Smith, which worked out really well. But that's, you know, another case of an owner being great. But then you know, when you look at around the league, like I couldn't tell you who the owner of the Spurs is. Like I don't know who it is. I have no clue who it is. But that person, whoever it is, stays out of the way of R.C. Buford and stays out of the way of Greg Popovich. You go out to, you know, Golden State until they've had your huge run of success. Like you didn't really hear too much about a lot of the ownership of the Golden State Warriors. Yeah, like you didn't hear from the Lakers a whole ton until they started winning a whole ton.
Yeah, no, Goober and Lacob, Lacob's involved, but not super involved, and he knows his role, and that's a great owner relies on somebody else.
They hire the right people,
manager, right? And that's the problem.
You know what I mean? Like the problem with you look at the Celtics as another example, like Wick Grossbeck and Steve Pagula and all those guys. You know, they were just like, we hired Danny. Danny's going to figure this out. He's going to help. He has to trust it. Like, there's an obvious hierarchy there, but everybody trusts everybody else to do their job. You know, it's frustrating. I understand if you're a Phoenix Sun fan and you have all this young talent and you're sitting there thinking, okay, you know, it's going to be rough for a little bit here, but there's going to be some light at the end of the tunnel. Now that light has kind of been turned off because now you have nobody running the show.
Yeah,
and now you don't know what the direction is.
It's too bad because, again, I felt like there was so much promise with this team, you know, as recently as a couple months ago. And then, you know, Ryan McDonough makes a trade and empties his point guard arsenal. Like you said, he had 3 of them not too long ago. Now he's got none. So you started to wonder, all right, how good can they really be without a point guard? And then, Booker goes down with the injury, and I don't know when he's going to be back and how healthy he's going to be at the outset. So now you got like Ayton by himself. And he's going to, again, listen, Sean Miller told me a while ago, and I kind of believe him at this point, like he thinks he's going to average like 10 rebounds a game as a rookie. And I thought at first, I was like, you're out of your mind. But I really do think DeAndre Ayton, and part of it is just who else is on the team. He may average 18 and 10 as a rookie, like, and run away with Rookie of the Year. I have Marvin Bagley winning it, but the more I think about it, like, I don't think Ayton even needs a point guard. I think he's just going to go get his, and they're going to be down by, 20, 30 points in a lot of these games, so he's just going to get, kind of phony numbers is what I call it. And then Bagley will too. He'll get plenty of phony numbers, and so will Trae Young for Atlanta. These teams that are going to be at the bottom of the league. Speaking of bottom of the league.
Well, wait a minute. For me, yeah. What is the biggest mistake Ryan McDonough made? Was it trying to establish a 3-point guard team that didn't really work out? Was it the 2016 draft they took Dragon Bender and Marquise Chris and didn't pick Jamal Murray? Is it trading for, trading for Ryan Anderson at any point with his current contract? Like, what was the tipping point here? Because, like, for me, that 2016 draft was really tough. But instead of walking away with, like, Chris Dunn at 4 and, like, Jamal Murray or whatever have you, like, they ended up with Dragon Bender, who, again, was interesting, was the mystery man of the draft, so to speak, right? Nobody knew what he was. He was this kid in Croatia, 7 feet tall, hit a couple of threes. You had, Tony Kukoc is, like, vouching for him, right? And then you have Marquise Chris, who could jump out of the gym, played in that Washington team. Not a lot of structure there. I think DeJounte Murray is on that team, which is interesting because we're going to talk about that later. But you saw the athleticism, and you're like, okay, well, this guy can jump out of the gym. He can block shots a little bit. If he puts it together, maybe he can. But none of those guys produced anything. Dragan Bender still rides the bench with regularity.
But that draft
and
stinks,
Marquise Chris doesn't even play anymore.
But that draft, other than the top couple of guys, really hasn't been very good. So, yes.
True.
You might have, if you wanted to go guard again, you could have had Jamal Murray or Chris Dunn. But look at the bigs. Like, yeah, you would take Jakob Poeltl right now over Chris or Bender. You take him in a heartbeat. You take Domas Sabonis in a heartbeat over those guys. But those guys aren't all-stars either. They're good rotation bigs. Right. I don't know if we've given up on Marquise Chris yet. Bender, maybe they have a little bit. Well,
they clearly came up with Chris. They traded him away to get Ryan Anderson.
Right, but at least they got something back. I mean, obviously Ryan Anderson's contract is an abomination, but you added a big who could stretch the floor, and I think he felt like adding Ariza and Ryan Anderson would help them right away with some of these other young guys, with Booker, with Ayton, bringing in veterans. That are more professional veterans, right? Professional veterans who can help you right away. With Ariza can help you in numerous ways, and Ryan Anderson can help you score the ball because he can stretch the floor. It's not like he's that many years removed from being productive as an offensive player. Can he guard? Not really. Again, his contract's terrible. So I guess, yeah, you're probably right at the end of the day. That's probably where they kind of struck out and went wrong. Alex Len, another one. I mean, that didn't help either. But you want to go to that draft and the bigs behind him. There were a few decent ones, but it was Nerlens Noel. You had who else was behind him? That one. Steven Adams was behind him. That would have been a good pick. Obviously, C.J. McCollum, but they went big.
McCollum would have worked out pretty well.
Giannis, you think Giannis would have helped him right now?
Well, no, you can't.
I'm kidding.
That's not fair.
No, I know.
That's not fair.
You can't. And that draft wasn't great behind him. So you can always play this game. Who you should have drafted. Well, he took Alex Len. A lot of people thought it was a reach, and it was. And Marquise Chris and Dragan Bender. So you kind of went 0 for 3 on those bigs. And now you're kind of in the spot you are. But nobody saw this coming right now. And that's something where, again, Phoenix is taking a step back instead of taking steps forward, which is what we thought they'd do this year. I didn't think they were going to contend for a playoff spot, but I did think they'd win, 5, 8 more games, and Ryan McDonough could save his job for another year just based on the promise that this team holds with Ayton, with Booker. But they need another point guard. Listen, they have no point guards, but I'm not sure no point guards is any worse than having Brandon Knight as your point guard. Today's show is brought to you by Charlotte's Web. I've been hearing this a lot lately. Companies trying to sell you hemp extract oil to try and help you with a few ailments. Maybe you have too much stress in your life. Maybe you need some relief from some injuries you've racked up either on or off the court. Maybe you think you need a little more focus in your life. Or maybe you just want to flat out sleep better. Any of these sound familiar? Well, there is a solution. Hemp extract oils with CBD can help. But that, of course, brings up a new problem. How do you know which companies to trust? That's where Charlotte's Web comes into play. Customers trust Charlotte's Web because the 250,000 plants they care for are tended by hand. The whole plant extract is filtered 5 times for quality and consistency. Charlotte's Web also makes sure that there aren't any added chemicals used in their plants. No pesticides, no herbicides, no fungicides. They ensure that their hemp oils are of the highest quality because they test for microbiomes, residual solvents, and heavy metals. So get started with Charlotte's Web today. They're offering a unique offer to our listeners. Go to cwhemp.com and enter the code GOOD at checkout and get 10% off your order. Don't forget to enter the code GOOD at checkout. Get 10% off. Some exclusions apply. See website for full details. These statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease.
Let me ask you a question. How quickly does Danny Ainge pick up the phone? Because Danny loves to trade with new GMs and try and fleece them for all they're worth. That's just the way it is.
What do they have?
Who, the Suns?
I mean, you're not
I don't
getting
know.
Booker. Yes, Rozier. I just don't think Danny Ainge wants to trade anything on the current team. I don't think he wants to trade Terry Rozier. I think he's in a weird spot right now with Kyrie. Kyrie comes out with this declaration this past week, at this, season ticket holder open, practice where he takes the mic and says, I'm going to be back. As long as you guys will have me, I'm going to be back. And obviously, Danny Ainge wants him back as long as he's healthy. But he's also got to be careful right now to bring this thing as long as he can and make sure Kyrie's knee's healthy. And that's where you got to be careful, too, with Terry Rozier. Because what do you do in a year from now? I guess you worry about it then, right? But you can't trade Rozier now. You cannot trade him because you trade Rozier and Kyrie gets hurt, and then you got no shot. You have 0 shot. Where at least we saw it last year. Kyrie gets hurt, and you have Rozier, you can get to the NBA Finals this year with Rozier.
Yeah, still, yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, I've been, the limited action we've seen of the Celtics in the preseason, which hasn't been pretty. The guy I've been most impressed with about over everybody on the team has been Terry Rozier. Looks fantastic, and I agree with you on that. Like Kyrie, commits long term, and everybody's jacked up about it and whatever, and he's not going to sign it until next season because financially it makes the most sense. Like I get it, right? But it's the weirdest spot for Danny Ainge because Danny's a guy who understands, don't let an asset go away for nothing. And in this case, I think there's potential here that he might have to with Rozier and or Kyrie. I think, and Wick Grossbeck said this, I think in 98.5 Sports about how they view Kyrie as one of the best players in the world. They love his talent. They love everything about him. And
I think he said that. I think he said that to me about Rondo back in the day too. So let's take it with a grain of salt here too.
Well, Rondo, he had his moments. He at one point there was a game 6 in Miami where he went crazy against and almost brought it back. I forget what game it was. Game something like 6 or I think it was 6 in 2010 or 2012, something like that, against that Miami team. But Kyrie's obviously a different animal. So obviously, I think they want to have him. He's the star that attracts other people, including potentially Anthony Davis here. But Terry Rozier is going to end up leaving for nothing if everything goes right. Like I'm not sure. Like, it's not fair to Rozier, who's clearly a starting point guard at this point and should have his own team. Where does he go in the rest of this debate? And like with Kyrie being there long term, he has to find a way to get somewhere. So I think Danny at some point is going to have to take a sacrifice and say, look, I didn't get something for Rozier, but, I guess the thing I get is long-term security with Kyrie Irving, I guess. But,
right,
Kyrie signing long-term with the Celtics. Yeah, that signing long-term with the Celtics made the most. Like, all this stuff that came out about Kyrie potentially going to New York to play with Jimmy, and like all this other stuff about Jimmy Butler and all this nonsense. Like, that was only coming from Jimmy's camp. You only hear anything from Jimmy's camp. You find out from Kyrie, he hasn't talked to Jimmy Butler about that kind of thing in 2 years. And when you look at the rest of the NBA landscape, like, where was Kyrie going to go, Jeff? Like, where was he going to go?
It made no sense.
There's nowhere else to go.
Well, it just wasn't logical anyway to assume that why would he be unhappy with this situation, with it being his team, which is what he wanted. So at the end of the game, who's going to have the ball in their hands? It's going to be Kyrie. Now, could it go to Tatum at times? Could it go to Hayward at times? Could it go to Horford or Jaylen Brown? Sure. But the bottom line is Kyrie's going to have the ball to make the decisions where it goes, whether it stays with him and he makes the play or he makes it for others. So it's his team ultimately. And as I've said, like, he's got like 3 of the lowest ego, if you want to call them superstars. They're not superstars, but they're all like second-tier stars right now. Gordon Hayward, Jason Tatum, and Al Horford are 3 of like the lowest ego, lowest maintenance dudes you will ever find. And Kyrie's got Brad Stevens as a coach. So like the thought of like this New York, Brooklyn crap just made no sense. It wasn't logical at all, but because Kyrie didn't squash it immediately, it kind of picked up a little bit of steam and people started speculating, oh, Jimmy Butler and Kyrie, they're friends and they're both a little bit weird and maybe they would go together to New York. Well,
do you think that had anything to do with Kyrie coming out with this? Like, do you think the fact that like Kyrie's sitting there saying, like, do I have to answer this question? I have to talk about this literally every single post-game press conference I'm going to talk about whether I want to stay here or not. I'm going to say, man, I think partly his coming out with the, I'm going to be here long term is basically just to be like, you know what? I'm sick of answering this question already. This is going to get ridiculous. Let's just put an end to this now and get this over with now. And now I don't have to answer this anymore. Now I get, like, as Kyrie says, now I can focus on basketball. You looked at some of the, like, Adam Himmelsbach at the Boston Globe did a great job writing about Kyrie and, Jamal Crawford up in Seattle playing 5-on-5 and getting some runs going. How Kyrie's like, yeah, I could have gone to L.A., but it's like just too over the top. It's too commercialized now. I can't get away from the press and focus solely on basketball. Like, I really do think at the end of the day that maybe Kyrie and Durant, they both left situations, but for similar reasons. Right? They just wanted to be about basketball. They don't want to have all the other outside nonsense. Now, Durant joined the Warriors and created one of the best teams of all time. Kyrie got traded to a team. He fell into the right situation. He got lucky in that regard, but again, at the end of the day, I think it really is just all about basketball for Kyrie Irving, which again comes back to why would he go anywhere else if it's just solely about basketball at this point?
Yeah, to me, this was a sign of maturity for Kyrie, that he did this before the season. And I think he realized, too, like, this could be a distraction for the team. And we've got a potential to have a special season. Now, again, you're going to need some help from Golden State in order for it to be really special and win an NBA title. Because if all those guys are healthy, I don't see how the Celtics are beating them. But, who knows? Stranger things have happened, right? So I think that was part of it, too, of Kyrie just saying, like, this isn't what this team needs, is for me to have to answer this question over and over and over, and other players to have to answer this question. Like, how are other players going to perceive Kyrie if he doesn't hit this head on and say, you know what? Yeah, I want to be back here. Why wouldn't I want to be back here? Everything's in place. And if he leaves, like, I just feel like he would get absolutely obliterated by people of being all about himself instead of all about winning, because he's got the opportunity now to he had the opportunity to win before, but it wasn't his team. Now he's got the opportunity to win, and it's his team. So what else do you want, Kyrie?
Well, interesting that you mentioned that maturity thing, and you mentioned, I think, a good point of like why his teammates gonna have to answer for this throughout the entire season too. You know what that reminds me of? Kyrie back in Cleveland having to answer for LeBron James all the time. You know what I mean? Like that's one of the things that bugged Kyrie about playing in Cleveland, because everything was about LeBron. When things went well, it was like, LeBron's playing really great. It's like, yeah, there's other guys on this team too. And Kyrie got sick of and fed up about, how LeBron James got credit for everything, whereas Kyrie was a huge cog in that machine. So I think Kyrie here, and I think this is a good point by you, Jeff, saying that he might have matured a little bit and maybe is just saving the rest of his teammates from dealing with something that he had to deal with for years in Cleveland. Now, albeit in a different way, but literally answering like every single question has to be about Kyrie Irving and not about basketball in general. So hats off to you for pointing that out.
So I was asked on a podcast by Sherrod Blakely and Chris Forsberg, who work for NBC Boston, whether I was worried about the Celtics. They're 1-3 in the preseason, and I laughed about it because I didn't realize anybody was worried about the Celtics right now. I really didn't, because frankly I don't really pay attention that much to the preseason because it doesn't really matter. At the end of the day, it's pretty much irrelevant. Not for everybody, not for every player, not for every team, but I think for the Celtics team, sure. Would you like to get off to a good start and be really good defensively and sharing the ball, moving the ball? Absolutely. But it's not enough to make me concerned whether this team is going to fit together at the right time. And it may not be what it was last year. They may not go on a 16-game winning streak early after losing Gordon Hayward for the year. I mean, that was just that just shows you how you can't plan for things. So I think this thing could turn quickly. They got to figure out how to play with each other. There is only one ball. They've got to share it. They've got to trust in their teammates, and they will. But like you said, Terry Rozier's looked great. For me, it's as much about keeping these guys happy as anything else and keeping them engaged and in their roles, because ultimately that's going to be the thing that this team's going to have to worry about more than anything, is sacrificing, because every player on this team is probably going to have a lesser role than what they've had in the past, whether it's somewhere else or even in the playoffs last season for Jason Tatum.
Yeah, they all know that too. They've been talking about that a lot throughout this offseason and preseason, how it's going to take everybody sacrificing a little bit. It's not just going to be one person, and that's the stuff you want to hear. If you're Brad Stevens, it means that the message you're delivering at least is getting through to guys a little bit. We'll see how it translates on the court. But, preseason is tough, and it's tough for a couple of reasons for this Celtics team. One, the biggest, obviously, hurdle they have to overcome is trying to get Gordon Hayward back in the rhythm again. And with me, frankly, I was impressed with how in shape he is, but you can tell the rhythm's off. I mean, you can just see it. I mean, he's getting the spots, he's doing all this stuff, but he doesn't have that rhythm yet where, the ball, jumps off his hands and it's going in the basket, right? So, and I think it's like Tatum's having a similar problem. I thought Jalen's looked pretty good. I thought Kyrie looked good in the limited action we saw him. But the big piece is Hayward. They all know it. They know they have to get him back and fully engaged and fully up to speed. That's going to take some time. I mean, they go back and look at some of these other super teams. Like that Miami Heat team, relatively struggled out of the gate when they first started. Not everybody can roll off the type of wins that the 08 Celtics rolled off, speaking of Celtics teams, with the KG, Pierce, and Allen, where they were ridiculous right from the jump. That Miami team struggled at first to try and figure out what their identity was and who needed to step up in what spots. Now, obviously, they ended up being, again, one of the greatest teams in NBA history eventually. But it did take time to get there. I think the Celtics team's going to have similar speed bumps. They're not, they might be more deep than those Heat teams, but they don't have the top-end talent those Heat teams had back when Wade, Bosh, and LeBron were in their prime. So, again, just be patient, relax. Everybody relax. It'll be fine.
Today's show is also brought to you by Audible. I think we all know that Audible has the largest selection of audiobooks you'll find anywhere. Go ahead and search for something. I just recently went on and found out Jim Calhoun's book, A Passion to Lead, is on there. First off, what a story. One of the greatest coaches, not just in UConn history, but in basketball history. and he narrates the book himself. A former colleague of mine at ESPN, Ian O'Connor, just wrote a book about New England Patriots coach Bill Belichick that the entire internet is raving about. But now Audible wants to introduce you guys to Audible Originals, exclusive titles created by celebrated storytellers from around the world, from different journalists, screenwriters, authors, and more. Every month, Audible members get 1 credit, good for any book on Audible. Plus, they get 2 selections from Audible Originals. This is a deal you can't get anywhere else. You also get access to fitness and health tips created exclusively for Audible. Listen at home, at the gym, in the car, wherever. Plus, with Audible, your books are yours to keep, even if you cancel your membership. Don't waste any more time. Get started for free today with Audible. Go to audible.com/plenty or text plenty to 500500 for a 30-day free trial with Audible, which comes with an audiobook and 2 audiobook originals. That's audible.com/plenty or text the word plenty to 500500. One team and one franchise that has to be concerned right now, Evan, is the San Antonio Spurs. I mean, how can they not be? They lose DeJounte Murray for the season with a torn ACL, second-year guard, talented kid who's projected to be their starting point guard now that Tony Parker's gone. So, I don't know if this San Antonio Spurs team now is a playoff team, and I never thought I'd say that, especially a team now that's got LaMarcus Aldridge and DeMar DeRozan. So they've still got 2 all-star caliber players, but Kawhi Leonard's gone, and obviously Tim Duncan's been gone, and Parker and Ginobili, and you've just got those culture guys that are all gone at this point. And you wonder, again, are they going to be fighting just to get in the playoffs? Who's their point guard going to be? I mean, who?
I think it's
Patty Mills.
I think it's Patty Mills could be on there. They drafted Derek White at one point. He's a young kid, so I wouldn't hit him the reins just yet. Probably gonna be Patty Mills. But they've lost. They've lost John Murray. Their draft pick Lonnie Walker is gonna be hurt, and he's gonna be out for a while.
He's
tore meniscus there.
Yeah.
They lose Kawhi, they lose Tony Parker, they lose Manu Ginobili. I mean, they've lost a whole bunch of stuff. And yeah, there's got to be some concern in San Antonio for sure. But this is the ultimate trust the machine thing.
I don't trust the machine here. I gotta say, I don't trust the machine anymore. I'm done trusting the machine because all those guys that link back, other than Greg Popovich, are gone. Like Patty Mills is a good point guard, but he's a good backup point guard.
No Danny Green either. No, Danny Green is gone.
Right. So what do you have anymore that's kind of been handed down that these guys go out there and you know how when teams played the Spurs before, I think they just felt like they had it all together. They played so well together that it was almost that intimidation factor because you knew they were going to run their stuff. They were going to be prepared. They were going to be well coached. Now you look at it all and you're like, all right, what do they have other than Popovich that scares you? And again, DeRozan's a good player, a good number 2 guy on a team. LaMarcus Aldridge, a good number 2 guy on a team. But those guys aren't good enough with the supporting cast they have. I like Jakob Poeltl, but he's still got a ways to go. Pau Gasol's pretty much, he and Rudy Gay, they're at the end of their careers. So I don't know. I don't know what they're going to do. I don't know what they're going to do to get it back and how long Pop is going to go with this group. He's going to go through the Olympics in a couple of years, but after that, I mean, Pop's getting up there. He's no young, spring chicken here. If he goes, what do you do?
Yeah, no, the Spurs are in a weird spot right now, and it's just interesting to watch a team of stability and the poster child of stability in the NBA for the past 2 decades. Run into probably, I'll even go. It is the biggest speed bump they've had in their 20-year run here, and there are question marks everywhere.
Is it 21 straight?
Yeah, it's an insane number. I mean, it's just a testament to the culture they've built in San Antonio. I mean, teams and organizations dream of the culture that San Antonio's been able to come up with, and now they just have a bunch of spare parts. I mean, you look at this roster. You have Marco Bellinelli, Davis Bertans. Both those guys I like, but like none of those guys are really gonna make it opposing coaches stay up at night. It's really just it's just a bunch of role guys. And again, this is a testament to Greg Popovich that I can't really totally write them off yet. You know what I mean?
What do you have to trade, Evan? The other part is, what do you have as trade bait? You really don't have anything that people are DeRozan's contract is brutal. You're not going to be able to move that. Aldridge, they tried it. They couldn't get what they wanted. Your young guys that have value are hurt right now. Murray, by the way, I'm not so sure DeJounte Murray is like the answer anyway at the point. Like, we're also acting like, DeJounte Murray's out for the year. Now they're really screwed. Like, and they are, because you go from DeJounte Murray to Patty Mills, and you're thinner and you don't have options now, where people thought at least the potential of Murray gave them a chance. But that's what it was. It was still potential. It was, it wasn't, we weren't saying that like DeJounte Murray was going to be necessarily this stabilizing force this year. He was an X factor type of guy for this season, going along with DeRozan and Aldridge. He kind of had to be that number 3 guy. And now you look at it, you're like, who the hell is going to be the number 3 guy for this team?
I guess my question is, so the identity, kind of piggyback off that, Pop eventually has to pick something to focus on. Now, normally the Spurs, well-run offense, a team that shares the ball really well. They moved to a slower pace last year, which was a little weird, but kind of national, the trend, nationally in the NBA to kind of slow things down a little bit, but that's the team they had. I don't think that'll change a lot this year. But, that's a team known for that's known for their defense that I think now is going to go away now that they don't have that identity anymore. They don't have Tim Duncan anymore. We're long past, the Admiral David Robinson at this point. No, Bruce Bowen's not walking through that door. They don't have Kawhi Leonard anymore. They don't have the defenders anymore. So my question for Pop is, he just say, screw this defense thing. We're just going to go, we're going to be hell-bent on offense. We're going to score. And we're going to play games in the, the hundreds, the 110s, 120s, and hope we can just outscore everybody with our good floor spacing. Again, they have good IQ players. It's part of being in the Spurs system is you have to have decent to high-level basketball IQ. So in that regard, maybe this is the way they can pivot. I mean, this is complete respect to Greg Popovich. I will not count him out of the playoffs. He is a brilliant tactician. He's a brilliant motivator. He knows what to do. I'm curious in what direction he goes in. And I just don't see the guys defensively make that kind of impact anymore. I mean, like, you're talking about Pau Gasol's going to log major minutes for this team. That guy can't play a lick of defense anymore. We know DeMar DeRozan can't play defense. We know Rudy Gay can't play defense. We know all these guys can't play defense. So what do they do instead? Try and run the game up. Try and run the score up. Speed the game up and go. With the way they played last year, it might have to be a drastic difference. And there are only several guys in the NBA that they can pull that kind of stuff off, to that kind of a big change in style of play. And I think Greg's one of them. I think he's one of the few.
You know what will be sad if it happens is Popovich at the end. I think he turned 70 this year, being semi-irrelevant and fighting just to get into the playoffs and being in that mediocre, the last place you want to be. And R.C. Buford's done a great job drafting, obviously, but you don't want to be drafting in that 20 range every year. And that's where they could be at this point, from that 15 to 20, 22 range, where you got to hit it right. And they've been able to do it. I mean, give them credit. They, did it with Kawhi. They Tony Parker, and they kept doing it. But I don't know if you can keep going to the well like that. And I'd hate to see Pop going out, not making the playoffs the last couple of years. And I could see it happening this year. I could. I mean, listen, it's going to be interesting to see what happens now in Minnesota. I mean, Jimmy Butler, this thing still isn't over. We thought it would be over by now. We thought Jimmy Butler would be dealt somewhere. In the Miami deal, according to all indications, is pretty much dead at this point. That Minnesota wanted too much. Glenn Taylor, their owner, wanted too much. Tibbs doesn't want to really move Butler. He's holding out hope that Jimmy Butler will come back walking through that door again, which Jimmy Butler is about as stubborn as anybody I've met. I'm not sure he's walking back. I don't see him ever putting on a T-Wolves uniform again. I think he'd sit out as long as he can, and he knows he's got the leverage. The longer he sits out, the more the Timberwolves stink, and eventually they got to pull the trigger and get something for him, or else they're going to lose him for nothing. So they're in a really tough spot. Obviously, Jimmy doesn't want to lose a year off his career either, but I think he understands the business end of this and the fact of the matter that he has the leverage as an all-star NBA player compared to a franchise that really doesn't have a whole hell of a lot of leverage right now.
Yeah, it's a nasty situation that unfortunately will not come to a peaceful end here. And look, I understand Minnesota's trying to get value back for Jimmy Butler, but eventually you're going to have to bite the bullet here and not get what you think is fair value back for Jimmy Butler. At some point, you're going to have to do, this is the best we can get, let's do this now sort of thing. And it just seems like that, I think it's Robert Taylor, the owner of the Timberwolves. He's having a tough Glenn Taylor. There we go. I mixed Robert Sarver and Glenn Taylor together. That's fantastic. Look, it's like 12 o'clock here on the East Coast. Okay. Anyway, look, they're not going to get fair value back from Jimmy anyway. This is what happens when you have a superstar that doesn't want to play there. It's just figuring out where to go. And the problem with this is Tom Thibodeau is trying to save his job, so he doesn't want to trade him to a Western Conference team, which eliminates, half the teams. And you look out east, not many teams want to trade with anyway. Miami obviously wants to get involved because they always want to be involved in high-end talent. You look at the 76ers, they could probably offer up something of value, but, it's not going to have Ben Simmons or Markelle Fultz or Joel Embiid in it.
Well, it might have Fultz in it. It might have Fultz in it, but nobody's trading for Markelle Fultz right now. That's the thing. Is if you're Philly, you can't trade Fultz today because his value, he still hasn't proven he can make a shot from beyond 15 feet. So Fultz is kind of one of those guys that if you're Philly, you just got to wait. You got to wait and hope. And, if you're going to trade him down the line, you got to hope he has a good 2-week stretch where he starts making some shots or whatnot, and maybe you can trade him. But, yeah, there aren't that many possibilities for Jimmy Butler. There really aren't. Again, I said it a few weeks ago, and I'll say it again. Like, Jimmy wants to be in a big city, right? He wants to be in the glitz and glamour and be in L.A. or Miami or New York or something like that. What about the Lakers?
Playing with LeBron is not easy, but, you'd be in a huge city. You'd be playing in playoff games for sure. The Lakers have the combination of young talent and vets that Tibbs wants. There's going to KCP's have to go in that deal, no question. And
I brought it up. What about that? What about Pope and Alonzo Ball for Jimmy Butler?
I think you're doing well if you're the Timberwolves, and that's what you get because the rumored deal from the Miami standpoint is like Bam Adebayo and Josh Richardson, who are
way less.
Look, I like Josh Richardson a bit. I was a big fan of Adebayo in Kentucky. I thought he was a nice high energy big guy. Nobody has the talent of Lonzo, who is a top 2 pick in the draft and has better IQ than 85% of the league. So and defends, and that's what Tibbs wants to defend. So he defends at a high level. He has the brain of a guy that's been in the league for years.
Yep.
The shot's a little iffy, but he does a lot of other stuff well. So I think that would be probably one of the best moves you could possibly make if you're Minnesota. Now I don't think Lakers are necessarily offering that, but if
you're the Lakers,
push comes to shove.
But if you're the Lakers, Evan, and you say, all right, like if we added Jimmy Butler here, and LeBron's going to be our point guard anyway, and we throw in Jimmy Butler to this team with Brandon Ingram, and then you got some of those vets coming off the bench, like in Kuzma you still have. Like, don't you think that team might finish like clearly? Wouldn't you put them against Houston and say,
"Oh yeah"?
That's what I'm saying. Like I get it. Maybe the Lakers feel like Magic feels like, all right, you know what? I'd rather have Kawhi in a year, and I won't have to give up anything for him, and I can add, I can have LeBron, Kawhi, Lonzo, Kuzma, Ingram, all these young guys. And I'm going to sit patient for a year, and then we're going to – but you also don't know how this is going to turn out. Like, LeBron's been pretty fortunate to be healthy for the most part throughout his career. What if something happens? You're still playing with a window here. And to me, you want to take advantage of the LeBron window as much as you possibly can because you don't know how long it's going to last. And if you could add a guy like Jimmy Butler and go in with that team, I don't know. I mean, again, I love Lonzo as much as anybody, but I would do that trade if I were the Lakers, just to give him a chance right away to contend. Thanks again joining us for another edition of Good and Plenty. Remember, subscribe. We come out with an NBA edition every Tuesday, a college edition every Thursday, so subscribe. Give us your feedback, your reviews, iTunes, Stitcher, CLNS Media. You can find me again at Goodman Hoops. You can find me on Stadium, watchstadium.com, and thanks to Charlotte's Web. Also, show brought to you by Audible today, and thanks to my producer / co-host Evan Valenti, and we'll see you next week on Good and Plenty.